Islam Makachev's story is one of humble beginnings, transformed into extraordinary achievement. Born on October 18, 1991, in the Caucasus Mountains of Dagestan, Russia, Islam Makachev would grow up in a region steeped in combat sports tradition, where wrestling wasn't just a sport, it was a way of life. The mountainous landscape of his homeland shaped not just his physique, but his mentality, instilling in him the discipline and perseverance that would define his career. Dagestan, located in the North Caucasus region of Russia, has produced some of the world's most elite combat athletes. The region's cultural emphasis on wrestling and martial arts can be traced back generations. For centuries, wrestling served as both entertainment and a means of developing warriors. By the time Islam Makachev was born, Dagestan had already established itself as a breeding ground for world-class wrestlers and combat athletes. Growing up in such an environment, it meant that combat sports were woven into the fabric of daily life. Young boys trained from an early age, learning wrestling techniques almost as naturally as they learned to walk. The streets and gyms of Dagestan echoed with the sounds of training, the crash of bodies hitting mats, the grunt of effort, the encouragement of coaches. This was the world into which Islam Makachev was born. Family background. Islam Makachev's family background reflected the strong values prevalent in Dagestan. While specific details about his immediate family have been kept relatively private, what is clear is that his family supported his athletic pursuits from an early age. Growing up in a region where wrestling was revered provided natural mentorship and community support. The cultural environment meant that parents understood the value of developing their children's combat skills, not necessarily for future fame, but for character building, discipline, and the pursuit of excellence. His family's support would prove instrumental in his early development. Unlike many athletes who face resistance or financial hardship in pursuing their dreams, Makachev had the advantage of being in an environment where his chosen path was not only accepted, but celebrated. Early training years. Islam Makachev's introduction to combat sports came during his childhood in Dagestan. Like many young athletes in the region, he began with sambo and wrestling, the traditional sport of the Caucasus. These early years were crucial in developing his foundation. Wrestling taught him the fundamentals that would later translate seamlessly into mixed martial arts: balance, leverage, timing, and the ability to control opponents. As a young wrestler, Makachev showed remarkable promise. His coaches recognized his natural talent, his low center of gravity, his quick reflexes, and his intuitive understanding of angles and positioning. These weren't skills that could be taught overnight. They were the product of natural ability combined with countless hours of training throughout his teenage years. Makachev competed in regional wrestling tournaments, gradually building a reputation as one of the most talented young athletes in Dagestan. Success begat more intense training, which begat greater success, a virtuous cycle that positioned him for bigger challenges. Ahead, Part 2. Transition to MMA and early professional CAR. By the time Islam Makachev entered his early 20s, the landscape of combat sports was changing dramatically. While Dagestan remained rooted in its wrestling traditions, the rise of mixed martial arts represented a new frontier. MMA combined wrestling with striking, submissions, and tactical awareness, a sport that could truly test a fighter across all disciplines. Makachev made the strategic decision to transition to MMA in the mid-2000s. This decision wasn't made lightly. It required him to not only maintain his wrestling excellence, but to develop striking skills, learn submissions, and understand the multifaceted nature of modern combat. Yet his wrestling base provided an enormous advantage. While strikers had to learn wrestling, Makachev only had to learn striking and submissions. He already had the foundation that many considered the most difficult to develop. Makachev's early MMA career saw him competing in regional promotions throughout Russia and Eastern Europe. These fights were not televised on major networks, and detailed records from this period are somewhat fragmented. But what's clear is that he was building experience and refining his craft. He competed in various lightweight and welterweight bouts, learning the nuances of MMA against different styles of opponents. These early fights were invaluable. They taught him how to time his takedowns against opponents who were actively trying to strike him. They showed him the importance of controlling the pace of fights. They exposed him to the rhythms and flows of MMA competition that no training camp could fully simulate. Each victory built his confidence. Each loss or close call provided lessons that shaped his approach. The journey to the UFC, the world's premier mixed martial arts organization, is rarely straightforward. For most fighters, it involves years of competing in smaller promotions, building a record, and gradually attracting the attention of scouts and talent evaluators. Makachev's path followed this trajectory. As his reputation grew, so did his visibility. Victories against increasingly competitive opponents caught the attention of UFC management. The organization is constantly searching for raw talent from regions known for producing elite fighters. And Dagestan certainly qualified. In 2014, Islam Makachev received the call that would change his life and opportunity to compete in the Ultimate Kate Championship. Part 3. The UFC Journey, BGIN Islam. Makachev made his UFC debut in May 2014 against Ramazan Kozbalov in Sochi, Russia. This wasn't a main card fight. It was a relatively low-profile bout, Yet for Makachev, it represented the culmination of years of dedication and training. He was stepping into the octagon with the world's best fighters, true to his nature. Makachev approached the fight with wrestling as his foundation. He controlled the fight through superior takedowns and ground control, ultimately winning by decision. It was a statement: fight not flashy, not spectacular, but effective. It showed UFC management and observers that Makachev belonged at this level. Following his debut, Makachev competed regularly, typically fighting every 3 to 4 months. His early opponents in the UFC were stepping stones, but they were necessary stepping stones. He faced fighters like John Kavanagh, Adriano Martins, and Nick Lentz, respectable competitors who provided tests of his developing skills. During this period, Makachev's record in the UFC grew steadily. He won most of his fights by decision, wrestling his opponents into submission. While not always the most entertaining fights from a casual fan's perspective, they were masterclasses in control and positioning. His wrestling dominance was becoming legendary within the sport. One particularly significant victory came against former UFC title challenger Gleison Tibau in 2017. Tibau had competed at the highest levels of the lightweight division and had faced top contenders. The victory over Tibau elevated Makachev's profile, signaling that he was ready for stiffer competition. Around this same time, Makachev caught the eye of Khabib Nurmagomedov, the dominant lightweight champion and fellow Dagestani. Though they were in the same division and Khabib was already the champion, mutual respect developed between them. The two would often train together and support each other, bond strengthened by their shared Dagestan heritage and fighting philosophies. By 2017 and 2018, Makachev was becoming a regular UFC fighter, competing frequently and steadily climbing the lightweight rankings. His wrestling continued to be his calling card, but observers also noted the development of his striking. He was becoming a more complete mixed martial artist during this period. He fought quality opponents like Nick Lentz, David Zawada, and others. Each fight added to his experience and his growing reputation. While he wasn't yet in title contention, he was unmistakably building toward something significant. Part 4. Rise through the ranks. A turning point in Makachev's career came in 2018 when he faced Conor McGregor's former sparring partner and friend, James Vick. Though not a title fight, a victory would position him right at the edge of the top 15 rankings. Makachev dominated Vick, once again showcasing the wrestling prowess that had become his signature. As the lightweight division continued to evolve and some of the top contenders moved away, opportunities opened for hungry fighters like Makachev. He positioned himself perfectly to capitalize on these opportunities. The 2019 to 2020 period saw Makachev face increasingly formidable opposition. He fought Reza Madadi, securing a dominant victory. He faced Nick Lentz for the second time, again winning convincingly. Each victory was less flashy than Daminta systematic dismantling of opponents through superior wrestling and control. A particularly significant fight came against Arman Sarukian, an up-and-coming fighter with his own impressive credentials. Though Sarukian came close in the third round with some submission attempts, Makachev's overall control secured him another decision victory by 2020. Makachev had climbed into the top 15 of the lightweight division. This might not seem like a dramatic achievement, but it represented years of consistent, disciplined fighting. Unlike some fighters who burst onto the scene with one spectacular victory, Makachev had built his reputation through a long series of grinding, masterful performances. His fighting style, rooted in wrestling, methodical, and strategic, began to receive recognition from fight analysts and commentators. Some criticized his fight as boring compared to more striking-focused fighters. Yet others recognized the technical excellence and the complete dominance of his opponents. During these years, Makachev also continued to evolve his training methods. Based in Dagestan, he trained at American Kickboxing Club and other facilities, adding striking coaches to his team. His wrestling coaches remained central to his development, but he recognized that at the highest levels of the UFC, a wrestler must also be able to strike effectively, to set up takedowns, and to defend. Against striking, the quality of his training partners and coaches became increasingly elite. As his reputation grew, top-level fighters and coaches wanted to work with him. This created a virtuous cycle of improvement. Better training partners led to better performances, which led to more opportunities to train with elite-level talent. Part 5. Breakthrough and Sion Teo. In the year 2021 marked a turning point in Makachev's career. He entered the year ranked outside the top 10, but quickly began his ascent. In February 2021, he faced Dan Hooker and won by submission, his first submission victory in several years. The victory was dominant and caught the attention of fight fans worldwide. Later that year, he faced another quality opponent in Thiago Alves, securing yet another impressive victory through superior wrestling and control. With each win, his ranking climbed. By 2021, the lightweight division was in flux. Khabib Nurmagomedov had retired following his loss to Justin Gaethje and subsequent triumph over Justin Gaethje in 2021, leaving the title vacant. Various fighters were positioning themselves for a shot at the vacant or newly defended title. Makachev, through his consistent victories, was positioning himself among them. However, a crowded field meant that Makachev needed to make a statement. Continuing to win decisions against ranked opponents was good, but he needed a signature victory win over a known name. Someone the casual fan recognized That opportunity came in September 2021 when Makachev faced Banala Daraj. Dariush was a dangerous, accomplished striker with legitimate wrestling of his own. This fight represented a meaningful step up in competition. For the first time in his UFC career, Makachev was facing someone with truly elite-level striking who also had defensive wrestling. Makachev controlled the fight through superior wrestling, demonstrating that he could take down not just serviceable wrestlers, but someone with legitimate defensive credentials. The victory was impressive and moved him significantly up the rankings. Now, at the threshold of a title shot, the year 2022 saw Makachev make his definitive push toward a title shot. In February, he faced Rafael dos Anjos, a former lightweight champion. The victory over dos Anjos was clear and decisive, and it essentially secured his claim to a title opportunity in May 2022. In what could have been a title eliminator fight, Makachev faced Charles Oliveira. Oliveira was the reigning lightweight champion at the time, having won the title after Dustin Poirier's suspension. However, Oliveira missed weight, so while the title wasn't on the line, the fight carried enormous implications for the division. The victory over Charles Oliveira was perhaps the most significant of Makachev's career to that point. Oliveira was widely recognized as an elite fighter, dangerous striker with exceptional jiu-jitsu and submission skills. Yet Makachev's wrestling completely neutralized these advantages. He controlled every round, dominated on the ground, and won decisively. This victory wasn't just a win. It was a statement. Makachev had dismantled the reigning champion. Though it wasn't for the title, it made clear that Islam Makachev was ready for title contention. Part 6. The Championship. ERA in October 2023. Islam Makachev finally received his opportunity at UFC Gold when he challenged Volkanovski. Volkanovski was a legendary featherweight champion who had moved up to lightweight after dominating his former division for years. The championship fight was what many had anticipated. Makachev's superior wrestling and grappling against Volkanovski's superior striking and overall fight IQ. For 5 rounds, they battled. Makachev controlled much of the fight, using his wrestling to dictate the pace. However, Volkanovski's striking improved as the fight progressed, and he had moments of his own. When the judges' scorecards were read, Islam Makachev's hand was raised. He had won the UFC lightweight championship. Years of grinding victories, of consistent improvement, of masterful wrestling had culminated in standing as the champion of one of the UFC's most prestigious divisions. Following his victory over Volkanovski, Makachev began his reign as champion. His first successful title defense came against Dustin Poirier, one of the division's most accomplished fighters. Makachev dominated the fight through superior wrestling and control, once again showcasing that his wrestling was essentially undefensible at the lightweight level. Subsequent title defenses continued the pattern. Whether facing top contenders or rising challengers, Makachev's wrestling and ground control proved to be the answer. He dismantled opponents with systematic precision, rarely in danger despite facing elite-level competitors. During his championship reign, Makachev defeated several notable fighters. Each victory added to his legacy and solidified his place among the all-time great lightweights. His record as champion became increasingly impressive, with dominant decision victories being the norm. The striking quality of his opponents improved, but so did his striking defense and counter-striking. While remaining primarily a wrestler, he evolved into a more complete fighter at the championship level. Part 7: Legacy and Impact. Islam Makachev's success contributed to an ongoing legacy of Dagestan fighters dominating the UFC, following in the footsteps of Khabib Nurmagomedov. He represented a continuation of the region's dominance in mixed martial arts. The success of Dagestani fighters has elevated the global profile of the region and inspired young athletes to pursue combat sports. Makachev's career has served as a masterclass in the power of world-class wrestling. In modern MMA, in an era where striking coaches are abundant and striking has become increasingly specialized, Makachev demonstrated that elite wrestling remains the most effective base for MMA success. His wrestling isn't flashy or spectacular, it's fundamental, sound, and absolutely suffocating for his opponents. Over his career, Makachev evolves from a one-dimensional wrestler into a more complete fighter. While wrestling remained his foundation, he added layers of striking and submission defense. This evolution showed that the best fighters are those who can continue to improve and adapt. Makachev's dominance has reshaped the lightweight division. His wrestling-based approach has influenced how fighters train and prepare. He has inspired both fear and admiration. Fear, because wrestlers preparing for him know they face someone who might never allow them to fight on their preferred terms. And admiration because of his technical mastery and consistency. Part 8: Personal and Professional development. Throughout his career, Makachev has maintained a disciplined approach to training and preparation. Based primarily in Dagestan, he trains at established facilities while also bringing in specialized coaching from around the world. His training regimen is rigorous and methodical, not glamorous or flashy, but exceptionally effective. His philosophy emphasizes fundamental repetition and incremental improvement. Rather than seeking dramatic changes between fights, he focuses on slight refinements and adjustments. based on how opponents try to counter his approach. The relationship between Makachev and Khabib Nurmagomedov has been an interesting subplot in his career. As fellow Dagestanis in the UFC, they have trained together, supported each other, and shared a similar fighting philosophy. While Khabib retired from competition, he has remained involved in the sport, and his support for Makachev has been evident beyond the octagon. Makachev has maintained a relatively private personal life. He is married and has children, balancing the demands of a championship career with family responsibilities. His approach to life outside the octagon reflects the discipline that defines his fighting career. Part 9. Fighting. Style and technical analysis. The heart of Makachev's fighting style is his wrestling. His takedowns aren't flashy or particularly high amplitude. They're low-risk, high-sex probability techniques executed from fundamentally sound positions. He uses collar ties, clinched work, and positioning to set up his takedowns. Once on the ground, he uses his weight distribution and positioning to control opponents, making it extraordinarily difficult for them to escape or improve their position. Once a fight hits the ground, a Makachev enters his domain. His ground control is suffocating. He doesn't necessarily seek submissions or ground-and-pound finishes. Instead, he controls positions, controlling the pace of the fight, and landing strikes from positions of dominance. This approach often frustrates opponents who find themselves unable to escape or create space. As his career has progressed, Makachev's striking has improved considerably. Early in his career, his striking was serviceable, but not a primary weapon. Now, his striking is used strategically to set up takedowns, to defend against strikers, and to maintain distance when necessary. His striking lacks the flashiness of specialists, but demonstrates tactical competence. Makachev's submission defense has been largely exceptional. Facing skilled submission grapplers, he has rarely been submitted. His awareness of positioning, his ability to manage distance from the ground, and his understanding of leverage allow him to escape or avoid submissions that might catch other fighters. Part 10. Conclusion and lasting. Islam Makachev's career represents one of the great success stories in modern MMA. From humble beginnings in Dagestan, he has risen to become a world champion in the sport's most prestigious organization. His journey demonstrates the power of dedication, discipline, and incremental improvement in the annals of lightweight division history. Makachev's name stands among the elite, those who have not only won championships but have fundamentally influenced how the sport is played at the highest levels. His ascent from regional fighter to world champion occurred during an era of unprecedented global competition. In MMA, the UFC lightweight division has been home to some of the greatest fighters in mixed martial arts history. Champions like Brent Henderson, Sean Shirk, B.J. Penn, Frankie Edgar, Rafael dos Anjos, Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor, Tony Ferguson, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, and others have all left indelible marks on the division. Yet Makachev has demonstrated that he belongs in this pantheon of legends. What makes Makachev's achievement particularly significant is that he accomplished it during an era when the competitive level of MMA had reached unprecedented heights. Unlike fighters from previous generations who faced less specialized opponents, Makachev has competed against fighters with world-class training, access to the best coaches, and refined techniques across all disciplines. His dominance in this environment speaks volumes about his exceptional abilities. Makachev's career also illustrates a fundamental truth about MMA that has resonated throughout the sport: the importance of a world-class foundation. While many fighters try to become well-rounded by learning multiple disciplines, simultaneously spending equal time on striking, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and other specialties, Makachev built his career on mastering wrestling before systematically adding other skills. This approach proved extraordinarily effective in a sport that can often feel overwhelming. For athletes trying to excel in too many areas at once, the wrestling foundation that Makachev built in Dagestan provided him with several critical advantages. First, it gave him an unshakable base of confidence. He knew that no matter what happened in a fight, he had elite-level wrestling to fall back on. This psychological advantage cannot be understated. Knowing that you have a world-class skill set that your opponent must contend with provides tremendous peace of mind. Second, wrestling provided him with a strategic framework that he could build upon. All of his striking development has been oriented toward setting up his wrestling and controlling the pace of fights. His striking isn't designed to be a primary weapon, but rather a complementary tool that makes his wrestling more effective. This philosophy stands in contrast to many modern fighters who try to develop equally across all disciplines. While such an approach can produce fighters with no glaring weaknesses, it often results in fighters with no exceptional strengths either. Makachev's approach: master one thing supremely well, then build everything else around it, has proven to be the more effective template for championship-level success. For young fighters, particularly those from Dagestan and the Caucasus region, Makachev serves as an inspiration that transcends Mama. He has demonstrated that following the traditional wrestling path can still lead to elite-level MMA success, even in an era of increasingly specialized training. In a sport where new techniques and training methodologies emerge constantly, where striking has become increasingly technical and sophisticated, and where jiu-jitsu academies proliferate globally, Makachev has shown that the ancient art of wrestling remains supreme. This has had a cascading effect throughout combat sports globally. Young wrestlers in the United States, Eastern Europe, and around the world have seen Makachev's success and recognized the pathway to MMA stardom. Rather than abandoning their wrestling in favor of boxing or kickboxing training, they've doubled down on wrestling, using it as their foundation. This has led to a renaissance of wrestling in MMA, with an increasing number of elite fighters now built on strong wrestling bases beyond the fighting world. Makachev's success has elevated the global perception of Dagestan and the Caucasus region. The region has produced several world-class MMA fighters, but Makachev's championship status has brought particular attention to his homeland. Young athletes in Dagestan now see a clear pathway to international success through combat sports, further cementing the region's legacy as a producer of elite fighters as of the knowledge. Cutoff in January 2025. Makachev remains an active competitor and a dominant force in the lightweight division. He continues to hold the UFC lightweight championship, having successfully defended his title multiple times against elite-level competition. The UFC has been building toward several significant matchups for his championship reign, and the organization remains committed to presenting Makachev against the most dangerous challengers the lightweight division has to offer. One particularly significant upcoming challenge on the horizon involves rising contender Jair Darius, commonly known as JDD, Jair Darius. This potential matchup represents exactly the type of challenge that Makachev's career has been defined by facing dangerous, accomplished fighters at the peak of their abilities and demonstrating superior technique and strategy. Jayash has become one of the most talked about contenders in the lightweight division, known for his striking prowess, his unorthodox techniques, and his willingness to engage in high-paced fights. Darius represents a different challenge than some of Makachev's previous opponents. While previous challengers have often been either wrestlers who lack elite striking or strikers whose wrestling defense remains questionable, Darius presents a more complete package. His striking is legitimate. His footwork is constantly evolving, and he has shown the ability to create angles that trouble opponents. A Makachev versus Jair Darius matchup would be intriguing for several reasons. First, it would test whether Makachev can maintain his championship-level dominance against an opponent who is willing to strike and maintain distance rather than immediately seek to engage in wrestling exchanges. Second, it would serve as a measuring stick for the division if Darius can compete effectively with Makachev. It would signal that new contenders are rising to challenge the champion. If Makachev dominates, it would further cement his legacy as the premier lightweight of his era. The potential fight has captured the imagination of fight fans and analysts alike. Makachev wrestling versus Dariush's striking creativity represents the fundamental dichotomy that makes MMA compelling, the clash between different fighting styles and philosophies. In Makachev's corner would be his legendary wrestling and ground control. In Dariush's corner would be his willingness to fight on his feet and his creative, striking approach beyond his individual accomplishments. Makachev has had a broader impact on mixed martial arts. His success has influenced how fighters approach training and preparation. Many fighters who previously focused equally on multiple disciplines have refocused on developing one or two areas of elite competency. His methodical, systematic approach to fighting has inspired a generation of athletes to value consistency, discipline, and incremental improvement over flash and spectacle. Additionally, Makachev's dominance has sparked important conversations about the nature of championship-level fighting. In an era where entertaining, striking heavy fights garner more social media attention and streaming views than grinding, wrestling-based affairs, Makachev has demonstrated that the most effective fighting style, regardless of entertainment value, should be the one that wins titles. This has helped maintain wrestling's relevance in MMA, despite the sport's increasing emphasis on striking and high-scoring exchanges. Islam Makachev embodies a particular philosophy of excellence that extends beyond MMA. His approach to fighting reflects principles that apply across countless domains. Execute them with precision. Remain humble despite success. Continuously improve and never become complacent. These principles have carried him from a young wrestler in Dagestan to the championship stage of the world's premier fighting organization. His path has not been marked by sudden breakthroughs or overnight stardom. Instead, it has been characterized by steady, relentless improvement, fights with smaller profiles, learning from each experience, gradually climbing the rankings, and proving himself against increasingly difficult competition. This steady ascent is often less celebrated than fighters who achieve sudden fame through knockout victories or dramatic comebacks. Yet it demonstrates a level of consistency and professionalism that is arguably more impressive. As Makachev enters the later stages of his career, though still in his physical prime, his legacy is already secure. He will be remembered as one of the great lightweights of his generation, a champion who dominated elite-level competition through technical superiority and strategic mastery. Whether he faces Jair, Darius, Arman Sarukian, or other rising contenders in the lightweight division, his impact on the sport is already cemented. However, the most interesting aspect of Makachev's career moving forward is not what he has already accomplished, but what remains to be written. Will he continue to dominate the lightweight division and accumulate multiple successful title defenses? Will he move up to welterweight to seek glory in a higher weight class, following the path of other elite lightweights? Will he eventually transition out of competition and into a coaching role, mentoring the next generation of fighters? Islam Makachev's story is one of quiet excellence. Unlike some fighters who burst onto the scene with knockout power or exciting striking, who generate immediate buzz through their performances and captivate audiences with their dramatic victories, Makachev has built his career on methodical mastery. His fights might not always be the most visually exciting for casual observers, more accustomed to striking exchanges and submission attempts. However, for those who appreciate technical excellence, tactical wrestling, strategic fighting, and the chess match nature of elite-level MMA, Islam Makachev represents the highest level of mixed martial arts achievement. From his early days training in Dagestan to his current status as a world champion, Makachev has proven that wrestling still reigns supreme in MMA. More importantly, he has demonstrated that the fundamentals practiced with absolute precision, constantly refined, and applied with strategic intelligence, remain the surest path to championship glory. In an era of flashy striking, elaborate jiu-jitsu exchanges, and high-paced exchanges, Makachev's success serves as a reminder that sometimes the simplest, most fundamental approaches, when executed at the highest level, are the most devastating. His journey from Dagestan to the UFC championship belt stands as testament to the power of dedication, the importance of foundation, and the timeless effectiveness of wrestling in combat sports. Whether facing established champions or rising challengers like Jair Dariush, Islam Makachev continues to represent the best of what modern mixed martial arts can produce: a fighter who has mastered his craft and refined it to near perfection. His legacy will endure long after his final fight, inspiring generations of fighters to follow the path of technical excellence, steady improvement, and championship-level discipline.